changing. And joining us on set at this time, we have Chairman of the National Gas Company, Gerry Brooks. Mr. Brooks is presently the Chairman of the NGC Group of Companies. He's a retired Group COO of the regional conglomerate Ansel McCall. And Mr. Brooks is an attorney at law. He's also the Vice President of the Law Association. If I had to read his entire bio, it's going to take up the entire 15-minute slot for this interview. Mr. Brooks, good morning. How are you?
Thank you very much, Shima. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
You know, you are head of the NGC, one of the major flagship companies, major players in the energy sector. All of the key players are here this morning. What are your expectations for the 2017 edition of this conference?
Our expectations are one that is that it will provide a forum for dialogue. You have all of the major players locally, regionally, and hemispherically in Trinidad and Tobago, and it provides an opportunity for dialogue against the background of an industry that is going through seismic changes. The price of ammonia has dropped since 2014, almost 46%. The price of methanol has fallen 54%. The price of natural gas has moved from 440 down to 240. It's now on the way back up this morning. It's 324 Henry Hub. And that has major implications for our economy. As you know, gas represents approximately 85% of our exports and 45% of our GDP. So it's important from a sector standpoint, but it's also important from a country standpoint. And hopefully we'll find some consensus on key policy issues in the context of informing the conversation on the gas master plan.
I don't know whether it's secrecy, whether it's shrouded in controversy, but the gas master plan, what is the holdback and how has it affected the major players?
There's no secrecy around the gas master plan and there's no controversy around the gas master plan. The gas master plan, I think, has proceeded in a very orderly and in a very deliberate manner, where a task force was set up from the Standing Committee of Energy, where engagements took place with all of the upstreamers, the midstreamers, and the downstreamers, where those views have been collated into a task force report. That task force report is going to be discussed, I think, with the sector, and then it's going to be laid before Cabinet and ultimately the population. It is something which is going to shape the environment over the next 10 years, so we have to ensure that issues like gas availability, issues like gas allocation policy, the role of the NGC, how do we tweak and fine-tune our fiscal incentives? All of those are issues which have to be very deliberately considered because one is shaping the sector for the next decade.
You talk about the NGC model, and we've had a lot of independent analysts, some being former ministers, so we have some political brushes there, but everyone talks about the role of NGC and whether the model is still applicable currently moving forward, considering the changing dynamics. What is the NGC model now in terms of our negotiation, and how would you change it if you had full control over it?
Well, the NGC model is not a model which is purely limited to negotiations. And for those who argue that the NGC model needs to be re-engineered, they are absolutely correct. When one takes a look at the international dynamics, you see that demand has fallen off, particularly with China, which has impacted natural gas prices. The US has moved from being a net importer to a net exporter, and a net exporter in our own hemisphere, targeting markets in South America, so that you've seen Asian demand and prices fall, you have seen fresh competition in the hemisphere, and in that context, our old model of cheap, abundant gas as a jurisdiction must change, and hence the NGC's model must change. And so one of the things that we set about to do is to re-engineer the NGC, to ensure that it's one, fit for purpose, two, that we improve our bench strength, so that you'd have seen a new, very experienced CEO join us, Mark Luquan, with experience in Africa, experience in Australia, etc. We have strengthened our bench strength, and our platform is really built around four planks. One is to secure the current business. What does that mean? That means that the problem of gas availability, which feeds directly into our economy, and remember, our economy would have received $20 billion from energy 4 years ago. It's now receiving $6 billion. No surprise that our GDP has now fallen to 2.3% negative, forecasted for 2016, and we're trying to transition into growth in 2017. So one is that we're trying to secure gas supplies, and work very closely with the upstreamers in doing that. Contract negotiations are taking place, and those are at a very advanced stage. We're doing several things on that front. One is that we've worked very closely with BP on truck from a bilateral and multilateral standpoint, which gives us about 200 million scf of gas. We have worked very closely with BP on Juniper, and I congratulate TOFCO, but I also congratulate our national energy team, which assisted with the heavy lift platform. We are working very closely on the smaller marginal fields, 1A and 1B, to try to provide more gas. So number one priority is to secure the current business, improve the revenues, and improve the gas supply working with the upstreamers. The second thing that we've decided to do, and we've agreed as a board, is that we've got to grow our business locally and regionally. No longer can NGC be purely a domestic play. We've got to grow in the value chain, and we've also got to grow hemispherically and grow globally. So you'd have seen us go off quite recently, a second contingent from the NGC group, made up of 25 companies, to Guyana. And we've just about to establish an MOU at the government level and an MOU at the company level. Guyana, the oil find is between 800 to 1 billion, 1.3 billion oil equivalent. And there are a couple other things I could mention as we go along.
Now, you know, Mr. Brooks, Judy did the story earlier about the Juniper project. A lot of excitement. How much of a difference is that going to make in filling the gaps currently in terms of the shortfall of gas? And then there are other projects which a lot of people believe, I think Kevin Ramnaran was very vocal, that the Angeline project should have already been started, that the contract should have already been signed.
I'm going to answer the Juniper project question in 2 ways, and then I'll talk about Angeline. In the case of Juniper, Juniper is an excellent story of local content, tough go. But it's also a story of jurisdictional competitiveness. We have to make our jurisdiction competitive with topsides, jackets, and piles. Mexico is pursuing that work, and Texas is pursuing that work. 750 people at the Heightened Library worked on that project. We need to bring more projects into Trinidad and Tobago, and therefore cost competitiveness and looking at the business model for Trinidad and Tobago is absolutely important. Juniper provides 590 million scuffs of gas. Truck provides 200 million scuffs of gas. But beyond Truck and Juniper, you've got to get Starfish going. BHP has been in phase 3, Angostura has been able to bring on some more gas, and we've also got to change the gas architecture by bringing in players like Perenco and Apache, etc. So Juniper very important to the gas supply, because what you will see in 2017, we think, is the gas availability stabilizing at about 3.1, 3.1666. So instead of going downward, that 10% decline, what you'll begin to see is a leveling off, and then hopefully be able to go forward. Laura and Manatee in 2022, 23, 24, but more urgently, Dragon is what is going to help us. So Juniper is very important. Now you raise the question of Angeline. Angeline speaks to the larger question of sanctioning projects, and a portfolio of projects which is needed. What we have got to do from a Trinidad and Tobago standpoint is we have got to determine what is the right plateau of gas that we need to have over a longer period. So for us at NGC, the question is, what is the plateau of gas? What is the quantum of gas? We believe that that's somewhere between 3.8 BCF and 4.1, 4.2 BCF. Why do we choose the 4.2 BCF number? We choose the 4.2 BCF number because that will satisfy the domestic requirements, that's the petrochemical plants. It will satisfy the export requirements, and we've got to have a think about export given the netbacks that we're earning. And we also have to think about downstream development. This is beyond methanol, beyond ammonia, to feed where there's far more value. So the Angeline story is a question of looking at those projects, the near-term projects, and saying, how do we create a basket of incentives that compensates the upstreamer, satisfies the downstreamer, and also satisfies government.
It is balancing the needs, Mr. Brooks, but how far off are we to getting the agreement signed?
This is which agreement?
The Angeline agreement.
I think that the Minister of Finance, in his role as Minister of Energy acting, this is his declaration at the launch of the Juniper platform, I think committed to having that done on or before the end of Q1, early Q2. Those were his words on the platform, and I simply reiterate his words. I can't speak for him.
But NGC must have an idea of whether or not that's a realistic promise.
I think it's a realistic promise, and I think that many of these contract negotiations are sensitive, they're delicate, they're complex, and have implications for other negotiations. So one has to approach them with a degree of care, and remember these agreements, when you set that agreement, in a sense, you're setting some precedent for other agreements as well.
I know we spoke about NGC's strategy moving forward, Mr. Brooks, but as we wrap this interview, the Prime Minister had an address to the nation earlier this year. Petrotrin dominated his 30-minute address. We spoke about the Energy Standing Committee, the role of Petrotrin, the role of the energy sector, and moving forward with the OWTU. The environment that you're operating in, it's really balancing the needs. What are you hoping to hear today to ensure that we all move in the same direction?
I am hoping for policy alignment, that there'll be a deeper conversation on policy and some of the policy prescriptions. SPT has to move forward. The fiscal incentives have to be tuned. the fiscal incentives around marginal fields. There are several different models. You have the Norway model, you have the Dutch model, where we can release some of that gas. There are 15 fields and over 150 marginal fields, and 15 fields with over 500 BCF. So what I'm hoping for is collaboration. I'm hoping for alignment, and it's absolutely important that we get alignment with labor, alignment of the upstreamers, downstreamers, midstreamers, and government, so that our jurisdiction can move forward in the context of other jurisdictions which have had the courage to make deep cuts. You take a look at the US. They, from a shale gas standpoint, have brought down their break-even point. Canada has released a host of jobs. So everybody is becoming leaner, sharper, and more focused. And as a jurisdiction, we have to rethink the model. And there are great, great opportunities here for sharing of equipment, for fine-tuning of fiscal policy, because what the data tells us is that we have approximately 30 to 50 TCF of resources available. We have to mine that in a sensible way while leveraging our expertise versus Ghana and some of our CARICOM neighbors to avoid painful lessons.
I know that we will have Mr. Brooks on set after the conference concludes to get his thoughts on exactly what has transpired over the last, what would have transpired over the 2-day period. But today the energy conference is happening. They're kicking it off at 9 a.m. this morning. So stay with CNC3. We take a very short break.